You can do the work. Your brain just says it costs too much. You sit in front of a simple task, and the body acts first. Tabs stay open, the phone gets picked up, your shoulders tighten, and the first click feels heavier than it should. That is not confusion. That is effort discounting, the way the mind values a reward less when the work gets harder. The easy task gets done. The harder one suddenly looks irrational, even when you know you are capable of it. You blame yourself for that. Most people do, but what you call laziness is often a cost calculation running too high. The system is not rejecting your ability. It is pricing effort. That matters because this is not a rare glitch. It is a built-in decision rule that shows up in ordinary life. Opening an email, starting a document, beginning a workout, planning a day. By the end, the thing you call a character problem will have a biological name. The open question is simple. If the task is inside your ability, why does your nervous system keep labeling it as not worth it? Effort discounting is a real decision process in the brain. When a task demands more cognitive control, more attention, or more persistence, its subjective value drops. Researchers studying effort-based choice and cost-benefit decision-making have shown that people do not evaluate reward in a vacuum. They weigh reward against the fuel the task seems to require. The anterior cingulate cortex is one node in that system. It helps track conflict, task demands, and whether control is worth spending. The prefrontal cortex then helps hold the goal online, keep rules in mind, and resist distraction. When the load feels high, the brain's valuation shifts before you even start. The effort cost rises, the task looks less worth it, and avoidance becomes more likely. This makes sense in an old environment. Energy was limited, and wasting it on low-return work could matter. But modern life keeps asking for long stretches of abstract effort. Inboxes, spreadsheets, planning, studying, and self-directed work with no immediate payoff. The brain still runs the old trade-off. What you experience as reluctance is the result of a resource-saving system deciding, very quickly, that the cost is too high. That is why the same person can answer a message, make coffee, and scroll without friction, then freeze in front of one document that only requires 10 minutes. The brain is not measuring minutes. It is measuring cost. It asks how much control, attention, and persistence this task will require, and then it discounts the reward before the work begins. The record on this is practical, not mystical. In effort-based choice tasks, people often choose the lower effort option when the reward difference is small. In the classic study by Mark Walton and colleagues in the anterior cingulate cortex, monkeys with damage to that region became less willing to choose higher effort rewards, which showed that this circuit helps weigh whether a task is worth the expenditure. In human work on cognitive control, the demand itself changes value. A task that requires sustained focus is not just a task. It is a cost. That cost is learned and updated. If your day has taught your brain that starting is unpleasant, the price gets marked up faster next time. If a task has no immediate payoff, no clear endpoint, or too many interruptions, the system gets stronger evidence that effort will not pay back. Then procrastination appears. From the outside, it looks like inconsistency. From the inside, it feels like resistance before movement. This is why the feeling is so specific. You can want the result and still avoid the start. You can care about the goal and still find the first step strangely expensive. The brain is not asking whether you are capable. It is asking whether the expected return justifies the control cost. That is the logic behind the hesitation, the tab switching, the delay, and the sense that a small task has become oddly heavy. Modern digital life feeds that logic every day. Notifications offer instant reward with almost no effort. Short videos, feeds, and easy clicks teach fast switching and low-cost payoff. Then a slow task arrives and the contrast is brutal. The harder work loses the comparison before you even begin it. The system that once conserved energy now applies the same rule to work that needs sustained attention. And once that pricing gets too high, the next step is not failure. It is avoidance that has been rehearsed into habit. The next question is why some tasks get marked up more than others. One detail makes that price feel even stranger. In effort-based choice research, the brain does not just respond to how hard a task is. It also responds to uncertainty. When control demands are unclear, the cost rises before any real work begins. The task is not expensive because it has been done. It is expensive because it might become hard. That is why opening a blank document can feel like walking into a bill you have not yet read. This is the lesser known part. The value drop can happen at the point of forecast, not only at the point of effort. The mind is running a prediction, and prediction is cheaper than action. So the resistance shows up first as a tiny pause, then as a scroll, then as a promise to start later. The body has already acted. The hands just have not caught up. And this is the part that stops being about discipline. If the brain marks uncertain effort as costly, then modern life keeps triggering the markup. The old system evolved when energy was precious and the next meal was not guaranteed. Hesitating made sense. A brain that spent fuel on low-return work could hurt the body. In that world, cost sensitivity protected survival. But the modern mismatch is severe. Notifications cut attention into pieces. Every app offers a quicker reward than the hard task in front of you. The result is not only delay. It is a steady re-education of value. The task that needs focus starts to look like a loss, while the easier escape looks like relief. That pattern compounds over a life. If the day keeps teaching the brain that starting is expensive, the price tag gets repeated until it feels like truth. A person begins to say, "I stall, I drift, I am bad at this," when the real event is simpler. The system keeps pricing entry too high. The feeling becomes identity because the same trade is rehearsed every day. In cognitive control research, the point is not that people lack ability. It is that they will spend effort only when the expected return is high enough. When repeated avoidance works, the brain learns that escape is the safer trade. That learning is powerful. The first 10 minutes of delay can hide the whole mechanism. So the symptom is often strongest before action, not during it. The dread sits at the start line. Once momentum exists, the task can feel easier than the story said it would. That is why the deep problem is not endurance. It is valuation. What makes the brain mark the task as expensive before any work has been done? The fix works because the brain learns by consequence, not by lecture. If the entry cost drops, the valuation changes. That is neuroplasticity. The brain updates its wiring through repeated experience. You do not persuade a cost system to feel differently. You give it a different trade. Start with the environment. Remove the cues that make escape easy and the task feel large. Close extra tabs. Put the phone out of reach. Leave the document open. Keep the next action visible. A task that is physically simpler to begin is priced as less costly, because the control system sees fewer barriers before reward can arrive. Then shrink the first move until it is almost too small to refuse. Open the file. Write one sentence. Put on shoes. Lay out the book. This is cue routine restructuring, but the plain meaning is simple. Make the first step obvious and cheap, so the brain does not have to pay a big fee before action starts. That matters for the valuation circuit itself. When starting becomes predictable, the system that tracks cost stops forecasting a large loss. The task is no longer coded as a massive demand. It becomes a short path to motion. Once motion begins, the reluctance loses leverage. Identity enters next. If you repeat the trade where you start before you feel ready, you are no longer acting like someone who avoids. You are teaching the brain a new label. I am someone who begins small and continues. That label is not positive thinking. It is a repeated model of behavior that the nervous system can learn. The practical point is that willpower is a poor lever here. Willpower asks the brain to pay the old price anyway. A system change lowers the price. Fewer choices, less friction, clearer next steps, and protected attention all reduce the perceived cost before the task begins. That is why the rewire has to be environmental first and personal second. The next part is the phased practice that turns that principle into something you can use today. First, change the room. If a task keeps stalling, strip away the friction that makes it feel large. Leave the needed tool on the desk. Silence the phone. Collapse the number of tabs. Put the first object in reach. The goal is not a perfect workspace. The goal is a cheaper start. Second, define the tiniest start in plain language. Not finish the report. Open the report and write the heading. Not study biology. Read one page. Not clean the kitchen. Put away 3 items. The brain prices effort by the size of the entry, so the entry has to be small enough to look like a fair trade. Third, repeat the same start until the cost signal quiets down. Repetition matters because the brain learns what happens after a cue. If the cue is always followed by a tiny start, Then action becomes the expected outcome. The task stops arriving as a bad deal. That is the reframe. You were not failing because you lacked willpower. Your nervous system was calling the task too costly. The symptom was real, but the verdict was wrong. Your brain prices effort too high, and that price can be changed. That also pays off the opening problem. The phone, the tabs, the frozen first click, the strange heaviness before a simple task. Those were not proof that you were lazy. They were signs that the cost system was overestimating the bill. Once the environment changes, the price drops. Once the price drops, action becomes easier to start. So the final self-image is not someone who forces harder. It is someone who designs better entry points and protects attention before the choice gets expensive. If this changed how you see it, the next one goes deeper. That is the plain fact. Your brain prices effort too high, and that price can be changed.